Okay, imagine this, a Spider-Man game where the narrative doesn't follow any of the movies or comic books. It's straight up web-slinging action with a unique story and the chance to face off against multiple Spider-Man villains. But I'm not talking about the new PlayStation 4 game. Let's go back to the era of the original PlayStation, where games were really beginning to understand the third dimension. And one company in particular, Activision, managed to expose a whole new audience to the world of skateboarding with their smash hit Tony Hawk Pro Skater. So when Marvel approached them with a chance to redefine the experience of being Spider-Man, honestly, it was a no-brainer. Today, on the release date for Spider-Man PlayStation 4, it's time to see what Activision did first with the same concept as we take a look at Spider-Man 2000 on the original PlayStation. Not to take any credit away from Activision, but I think they might have had a little bit of help. Before we start talking about the game, I have to pretty much say that Spider-Man is my favorite superhero of all time. I had the toys, I watched the cartoons. The only thing I truly regret in life is not knowing sooner about the Japanese live-action show. Anyway, Spider-Man came out swinging, landing on store shelves in the summer of 2000. This wasn't Activision's only major title during this time. They had Neversoft also working on the second Tony Hawk Pro Skater game, while they were making the Wall Crawler's new adventure. As you play through Spider-Man, you'll notice some references and similarities to the Pro Skater games, as they do use the same resources. Spider-Man 2000 managed to not only be the first fully 3D Spider-Man game, but it's also a pretty damn good game. The story is similar to other tales told in the comics, but with more witty lines and ridiculous scenarios. It all starts off at the Science Expo 2000. Dr. Otto Octavius is showing off his newest technological wonder when suddenly Spider-Man busts in and steals his equipment. But wait, isn't that Peter Parker in the crowd? That is definitely not Spider-Man then, and we've got ourselves a dilemma. At the same time, Eddie Brock is taking pictures of the event for the Daily Bugle and his boss, J. Jonah Jameson, when the imposter Spider-Man destroys his camera. Sensing his rage, the Venom symbiote takes over Eddie and he begins to pursue Spider-Man. After one cutscene, and within the first couple minutes, you already have two concurrent storylines between Spider-Man and Venom. You also have a whole lot of questions about other characters like JJJ, Doc Ock, and the mysterious imposter. Spidey will have to deal with all of these scenarios as he chases his doppelganger and encounters all sorts of obstacles, friend and foe alike. It's simple and effective storytelling, sprinkled in with some nice, witty dialogue from our boy Spider-Man.
Well, going down?
Something really cool that Activision and Neversoft did was use the limitations of the PlayStation to kind of mold their story a little bit. After the madness at the Science Expo, two unknown characters release a fog over the city of New York that's deemed, well, dangerous. I think it's mostly the developer's way of saving resources by not having to animate anything below the skyline. As for the gameplay itself, it's a third-person superhero brawler, which you might be used to after 572,000 Batman games. In 2000 though, this was new and exciting. Spider-Man has full axis control. There's no tank controls here. He can swing around New York City with a simple jump and web shot. There is a web meter, which you can refill with blue web cartridges, but you'll need to make sure it doesn't run out. There's also health cartridges and Spidey armor cartridges, which gives you more webbing, another health bar, and a new costume. Your dreams of letting the wall crawler, well, crawl on any wall are fully realized. Any surface that isn't the ground is fair game. The game takes advantage of this by having tunnels and paths that you can only access by crawling. In combat, Spider-Man has many ways to fight enemies, and they're not restricted to a generic beat-em-up. He can use his webs to tangle his enemies in place, he can shoot web balls, or make a web shield and use the pressure to knock back his enemies. There's also a couple of cool techniques like Spidey being able to pull in his foes with a string of web for a couple of good hits. You could grab them and beat them up, but that's just boring. If melee's more your thing, our favorite webhead has his own array of kicks and punches, but can also take the skies for a satisfying diving dropkick. Spidey also has some other cool tricks like making his own boxing gloves and ziplining around to avoid enemies. You'll need to use all of these techniques during the game, as Spider-Man 2000 offers all kinds of zany boss battles from electric fields to underwater layers. While this kind of gameplay system has been refined, especially with better camera controls, I can't deny that after 18 years, it's still fun to beat up low-poly henchmen. Speaking of low polygons, time has not been so nice to the visual style of Spider-Man 2000. We talked about the fog being a plot device to save time and money by not animating the streets of New York, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the game has aged well. Spider-Man's model isn't amazing, but it still looks okay, and most other characters with simple designs still look decent. Anything with a complicated face design like Black Cat, Doc Ock, etc. just look gross. The same thing applies to the environmental textures. Simple is always better when it comes to these older games. Now I am playing this on a PlayStation 3 as every model of the system can play PlayStation 1 games and upscale them to high definition. This helps the overall video picture quality, but since this is technically an emulation, pre-rendered resources aren't gonna look too good. The biggest victim of this is definitely the full motion videos, and it's a shame because there are definitely some really funny cutscenes in this game.
Now, the imposter was a shapeshifter, so that means it was either Mysterio or the Chameleon.
Hey, Chameleon was our idea. We thought of that.
Tell me this, Einstein. Who could have wanted to steal Octavius' technology?
Ooh, we know.
Who?
The Submariner.
Submariner? Get serious, will you?
Also, just as a fun little aside, this game is glitchy as all hell. Have a look. Even though some things are affected, that doesn't mean that the game aesthetic is complete garbage. I really like the emphasis of the red and blue color scheme inspired by Spider-Man's costume. It's a nice subtle touch. It's also really cool that each section of the game has its own comic book cover that shows off what's about to happen in that level. The game's cover art is iconic as hell. It takes, nice little inspiration from Amazing Spider-Man 100, but that perspective makes Spidey look like a daredevil. No pun intended. The game's soundtrack also adds to these visuals by having some really nice grooves accompany the action-packed gameplay. Tommy Tallarico, who you might know from Video Games Live, composed the music with this in mind, and he did a really good job. I gotta say, the main menu music is probably the best song of them all, but there's definitely some bias since it's based on the main Spider-Man theme song. Now, I did say earlier that the full-motion cutscenes haven't aged super well, but they do offer voice acting for every character. Spider-Man is voiced by Rino Romano, who reprised his role from the Spider-Man Unlimited cartoon, and honestly, he does a really good job. Another Unlimited alumni, Jennifer Hale, returns as Mary Jane Watson, but also voices Black Cat, who she portrayed in the 1994 cartoon. D. Bradley Baker and Darren Norris cover the rest of the cast, and the legendary Stan Lee narrates your story, which is just a nice cherry on the top of the Spider-Man sundae.
Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike. Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee here. Once again, we find our hero Peter Parker, better known around the world as the Amazing Spider-Man, in a heap of trouble.
Maybe it's just a reminder of having fun as a kid, but I always get excited to play this game again. It looks, sounds, and feels fun. Now that I've covered most of what I've wanted to talk about, we might as well cover the rest of the story. I'm sure you can assume what's going to happen since it's a Spider-Man story, but just for the uninitiated, there's going to be spoilers. So, as Spider-Man's trying to find his imposter, he's being thwarted by different villains from his past, most notably Venom. Venom thinks that Spidey is trying to mess with him, and so he kidnaps Spider-Man's girlfriend, Mary Jane, while also taking control of the sewer's Lizard Men as backup. However, Spider-Man's friend Black Cat tells him that Rhino is attacking a power plant. The pair win against Rhino, but Black Cat gets kidnapped by paramedics? After Spider-Man fights through all of this, he convinces Venom that it's not him, but the imposter Spider-Man that's causing all this mayhem, and so the two team up together to find the imposter. While they're doing that, Venom senses Carnage, another symbiote like him, and sets off to fight him, while Spider-Man explores the Daily Bugle to find the imposter, which is mysteriously riddled with symbiote cloning machines. After a whole lot of nonsense, it turns out that Spider-Man didn't actually steal Dr. Octavius' newest invention. It was actually the shape-shifting Mysterio. He managed to disguise himself as Spider-Man, but he's not actually doing this alone, he's working for somebody else. The secret plot apparently is to clone symbiotes and have them take over host bodies across New York, and the fog being spread is being used to help through that process. To stop them, Spider-Man makes his way to a waterfront warehouse spreading the fog, where he discovers the secret symbiote factory under the sea. Under the sea, just you and me, making clones of symbiote disease. Spider-Man also finds Black Cat here and manages to help her escape. Eventually, it's discovered that Octavius is behind everything and is teaming up with Carnage to bring the symbiote plan to fruition. Venom appears to help Spidey, and it's 2-on-2. However, since Carnage is on a bit of a rampage, Spider-Man has to fight both baddies and manages to defeat them. The symbiote leaves Carnage's host and fuses with Doc Ock, creating the unstoppable Monster Ock. Realizing that he can't fight it for obvious reasons, Spider-Man runs from Monster Ock and barely escapes the underwater lair. He gets saved by Captain America and the Avengers thanks to Black Cat, and with that, our story ends happily. The heroes and the villains all play cards in our final cutscenes, albeit with some different outcomes. Roll the credits, and that's it. As for bonus content, Spider-Man 2000 does include some nice extras. There's a training mode if you need help getting through the game, which includes all sorts of fun challenges, but if you're really bad, you can use Kid Mode, which is laughably easy. I played through almost the entire game with Spidey armor. It was that bad. Spidey armor is pretty cool as it gives you more health, but there's also alternate costumes you can get by doing different things in the game. You can dress up as various iterations of Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and even Captain Universe. Very out of left field with that one. As you're playing through the game, you'll notice some comic books laying around that you can collect. They're just for fun, but it's cool to look back at some iconic issues of the Amazing Spider-Man. You can also check out some of the storyboards from the game itself if you're into the art side of things. The game also has a couple little subtle pop culture references, including a few nods to our boy Tony Hawk Pro Skater. But if you really want some wacky gameplay and a plethora of all these references, you gotta play What If mode. At its core, What If mode is the director's cut of Spider-Man 2000, and by that I mean that the director caught all this shit out because it's honestly ridiculous. Each level has new elements added to it. Some are subtle and others are completely changed. You might even spot new heroes, new voice lines, and new scenarios. There's some pretty cool stuff in here, and all you'll need to do is go to the cheat code menu and type in GBHSRSPM. Any level you play now will have the changes added to them. I would recommend before you do this, save after the final level, because then you can jump to any level you want and see the changes from the regular game to What If mode, and then you don't actually have to go play through the entire game again. This is one of the coolest Easter eggs in any game, and I'm gonna be disappointed if Spider-Man PS4 does not include What If mode. Spider-Man 2000 is a new adventure filled with action and drama with characters from all over the Marvel universe making appearances. There's lots of fun to be had here, but it's not all smooth sailing. The character models and textures have not aged super well, and everything seems just a little bit aged, and also it's glitchy as all hell. But there's still a good game here, with a story with more twists and turns than that goddamn underwater maze. And there's all sorts of extra content to keep the fun going on. If Insomniac can take even a fraction of inspiration from this game and add it to their PS4 reinvention of the web slinger, I think we'll be in for a treat. Spider-Man 2000 is a fantastic amount of fun, and if you haven't already, you should play it. Live it. Are we done? We did? Good, cool, yeah. Slogan is still shit. Thanks for tuning in for some Spider-Man action. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is actually the first that's going to be featured on my newest project called Descent. Essentially, it's a new media thing I'm going to be doing with my friends where we talk about all sorts of stuff we like, such as video games, music, art, comic books, etc., etc. It's super cool. We're super excited to launch it. It's actually launching today, so make sure you go check out all of our social media and check out our website, thescent.net. As for Spider-Man PlayStation 4, I gotta get back to playing that. So, with all that said, I'm FalseProof, and I'll see you later.